This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything, gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com.
An Afghan grabbed a saw and started shooting into the crowd of us, because so many of us were kind of together in one area. Started shooting into it. Tico was the first guy hit. He had been shot in the neck and the front of his right shoulder, and he went down. John Pelham was one of our SOD guys, our intel collection guys that was there with us, and he also was killed immediately. And then 4 other guys, to include one of my teammates, had been shot, not fatally. 1 or 2 of them pretty bad. It kicked off, and those dudes just started maneuvering and shooting and, eliminating targets. We moved through, we did our thing. Fight for a little bit, it calmed down, it picked back up, and we went. And it wasn't a long sustained thing. It happened, a little bit throughout a couple of different positions that we were moving that night, but it was good. And it was also a cool experience. Like, I felt comfortable with those guys that, like, the sky isn't falling around me. These guys are managing this, and it gave me an opportunity to, like, just kind of see and experience it and do it, and, like, to take part in myself. And I put my fingers up to feel his pulse, and I felt his weak and thready pulse get weaker and weaker and weaker and stop. And because of the situation we were in, I got up and I grabbed my bag and moved on to the next guy who was wounded.
What's up, man? I'm so glad you're here in the studio this week. We have a ton to talk about.
It is great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we've had a couple conversations on the phone, and I'm glad that we're getting to do this together now. Let's go over a couple of your things. You started out your military career in the Navy, and you thought that's where you wanted to go, and that changed after about 4 years. Went over into the Army, Special Forces, 13 years in Special Forces. You're a medic. You've been deployed all over the world. You've worked in the schoolhouse. You've developed medical teaching devices, all of that kind of stuff for the schoolhouse. You've had an amazing career. So I kind of want to ask, the first question is, what does it mean to save someone's life to you?
Man, to save someone's life, that was the epitome of my time on active duty. I think that is giving someone a further opportunity to continue making a difference in the world and do what we are all placed here to do. So that was the focus of everything I had for many years. And that was an honorable thing, I think, to be a part of.
What do you think the difference, though? And I've asked this to medics before. You're there to save lives, but you're also there to take lives. And I want to ask you right at the beginning of this conversation, how do you balance that in your mind through all of your career?
That opportunity was the amazing thing presented to me, which completely came out of the blue in Special Forces assessment and selection. You get the unique opportunity in the depth of the medical training we get, as well as the tactical training on both sides. I got the opportunity to be on some great teams and get some amazing training. So you become amazingly proficient at both. And to balance that is an amazing opportunity and responsibility that shapes a lot of things, because the debt that's placed on you, where you have to use the proper discernment to, conduct a mission, do what you need to do, take the right lives, do that in, the proper way that you do that. But also you bear the burden of saving the lives of your teammates and your partner force and who's with you whenever you have the opportunity. I mean, it's such a heavy burden that it created a great work ethic for focus and remaining fit to remain proficient in my craft, to put myself in too deep of a hole as far as like sleep debt or things like that. I mean, I always wanted to stay. I knew I had to stay as capable as possible to make sure I got all that done. So I think it was a good driving factor to keep me as good as I could be throughout my career.
You think the weight of a medic is heavier than most of the members of the team?
Yeah. Short of the leadership, I think the heaviest burden falls on, like in SF, it falls on the team sergeant. Whoever that senior enlisted leader is in the special operations community, I think they have the heaviest burden. But second to them, I would say the medic, because you become also such a trusted agent on the team that you become an amateur psychologist, whether you like it or not, because your responsibility is being there for the guys, and they know that you're there for their well-being. And whenever that's not through a physically traumatic episode, that's through your being there for them to talk to and bring their problems to. And one of the things that kind of pushed me into psychology for, advanced studies later on down the road after I became, I started going to school.
So let me ask you, does that weight ever bother you in all of those years? Are you ever on a deployment? Or are you ever back training and you're like, golly, man, I wish I could just kind of go through this and enjoy it and be part of it instead of always carrying this responsibility? And like we said, maybe a dual responsibility.
No, it wasn't so burdensome that I couldn't enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed it because of that, because my purpose was clarified up front. Like, I knew I was here to do the job as well as take care of the guys. And no, I think being a medic is the best role on the team. I said that for years, particularly being the junior medic, because if you have the opportunity to have two medics on the team and you're the junior, like, you have less responsibilities. So yeah, I think it's the greatest job on the team because of the dual nature of what you're doing there.
All right, let's go back all the way to the beginning. Rural South Carolina.
Yeah.
What makes you decide, man, I got to get out of rural South Carolina and I got to see the world?
The little bit of the long part of the story is when I got to high school, we got the opportunity to choose between gym class and junior ROTC. And I picked junior ROTC because there was this cute girl that was recruiting for it. And I got into it. It's always a girl. I got into it, and he was one of my instructors my first year, ended up becoming my friend and mentor down the road. But Tony Lewis, who was a retired Ranger, did his entire career as an Army Ranger, like Ranger Reconnaissance Detachment in Mogadishu, like some historical missions he got a part of. He was like the Ranger's Ranger, and a friend of mine till today. Just having regular conversations with him and mentorship from him, I went through all the things. Like, we used to take trips down to Paris Island because we were so close in South Carolina. And, everybody wants to be a Marine after that. You're like, those dudes look amazing. They just tore me apart for 3 days. Like, we're all doing that. And some guys did. And I was close to that. And he came up to me at one point and he's like, what are you going to do after high school? And I was like, definitely going to be a Marine. He's like, Marines get treated like shit, man. I was like, fair enough. I mean, but, with that started the conversation. He's like, if you wanted to do anything in the world, what would you do? And I was like, I mean, I was like a 15-year-old kid. I was like, bro, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I was like, I don't know if I could do that though. And he's like, why not? There's nothing physically or mentally wrong with you. Like, do that. And I spent, some time thinking that. And at one point I went back to him and I was like, hey, look, man, I've really done some soul searching. I think I really probably belong in the Army. I think I'd be better off there. And he said, I think if you don't go try this, you're going to regret not having gone out there and given it a shot. It's like, fair enough. Like, yeah, I get that. So I did that. And I mean, 17 years old, enlisted, went out and gave it my shot. I went to Buds twice, actually. I went the first time, class 251 in early 2004, and had made it pretty far in the training. I got to Hell Week and had some substantial injuries and left the program. They put me on a boat in Little Creek, Virginia for a year. I got to work with the SEAL teams there and training back up, and went back out at a ripe 19 years old to give it my second shot. And a story followed me back from a bar that, it's like an untrue story saying, I was claiming to be a SEAL with some other guys I was there with, and which, I would never do because I knew the cost of that doing something like that. But whenever I had the instructors come down on me at the time, the way it was, and they're like, "You're not who we want. We don't want people like you here." And I was like, "Dude, this is all I want out of life." But I got a bad attitude, and I let it eat at me for a couple of weeks, and just getting all the special attention. I was like, "This isn't what I came for." So I dropped out of the program. I thought at the time I was done with the military entirely, but completed my enlistment, had an 8-hour break in service, and decided that again, through some mentorship from Tony Lewis at the time, like, I was thinking about going to the Army to be a Ranger, and he was like, "You already been in a few years. You're already an E5. Like, don't just go all the way back to step one." He's like, "I think you should consider Special Forces," which I did, and thank God, because got into that. Like I said, in SFAS, I decided to be a medic. That was the one thing I held on into my career, and it always interests me whenever guys have that thing they hold on to, because it's like, you meet a SEAL and they're like, "I was a Navy SEAL," or I've met, a friend of mine who is a retired SF officer, and I'm like, what'd you do in the military before we were getting to know each other? And it wasn't like I was an officer or I was a Green Beret. He was like, "I was a combat diver." Like, that was his thing. And for me, for all the different things I got to do in the military, like, I was a medic. Like, a medic is what I saw myself as throughout.
Bigger than the Green Beret?
Oh yeah. That was a fortunate luxury that I had starting off in the Navy. Was I joined the Navy to be in special warfare, and whenever that didn't happen, I was like, "All right, let's just mark time until I can get out of here." Like, I was a sailor, but that's not what I came for. And whenever I came over to the Army, I was the Navy guy in the Army, so I was almost like a misfit in that, the way that I saw myself, and
Right.
that that was a huge benefit as I left the military. I mean, 17 years later, well, 14 years later from the time I started the Army, 13 years out of the Army. But whenever I was in Special Forces, I never looked at myself as a Green Beret. Like, going through the regimental first formation and getting the Green Beret and graduating and getting to a team, like, I was so focused on what we had to do. I'm like, I just need to be better as a medic. Or I need to be better as an operator. Like, I need to run faster, be stronger, shoot straighter. I need to be better at this stuff. I didn't get wrapped up in the identity of it. And that was a blessing on the way out, because it minimized the identity that I had to re-identify coming out of the military. And it made transition, as well as having regular talks with Chris Free, but it made my transition out like a much simpler thing for me.
So you said 251 was your Bud's class. I think that was Sean Murphy's class too.
I think it was. Yeah. I remembered him. I mean, that was a long time ago, but yeah, there's a couple of guys I think you've had on that were in my class.
Yeah. I think he was 251, and he did it 5 times, which is,
yeah. Some dudes that were dudes that did it. I mean, I know guys that I ran into later on down the road in medic course, a medic refresher course we have to do, that, yeah, they went 3 times, 5 times. I mean, a good friend of mine that I know now that's involved in a nonprofit with me, he went all the way through, got in trouble, went out to the fleet for a few years, came back, went all the way through again. The dude was in the Navy for like 11 years before he finally got to the teams. I mean, that dude is like, he's hard as woodpecker lips, man. Like,
yeah, no kidding. As you become, because I think it's so interesting that you talk about not being wrapped up in that identity, because I think that these kind of jobs, like we always talk about, law enforcement, first responders, military, especially special operations, that becomes your identity. That becomes who you are. And it's the majority of what you put out. And like you said, when people get out, they have been that identity for so long that they have trouble turning into the identity that they actually are and actually have been the whole time.
yeah. And I think it's a substantial part of that is how you frame it. A conversation that I had with the guy, friend of mine, Leroy, who is the guy I just was speaking of, who was in the SEAL teams whenever he retired. He had a difficult time whenever he retired with his identity. I also happen to know that he's a believer. So as we started discussing that, I was like, "Look, let me introduce an idea to you." And I was like, "If it's okay," and I don't want to be insulting. I'm like, "Don't take this the wrong way and throw it out if you don't like it." But you didn't go from being a Navy SEAL to not being a SEAL. I was like, "You never were a Navy SEAL. You were always you, with the same capability and the same intelligence and the same wisdom. I mean, you built some more along the way, but you were always you. And that was just a job you had, that opportunity they gave you to do that thing." which kind of was similar in kind to a friend of mine who was, he was an operator at Delta. One of our friends had an unfortunate situation where he had to leave the unit and he was struggling with it. And he was like, dude, you weren't a Delta operator. He's like, you're a commando and they just let you do the job. You are still 100% of what you were coming here. And like, that doesn't identify you. That was an organization that lets you just use your skills and your tools. So I
You
think
think
that's,
you always believed in that?
yeah, I think, they hone them and they use certain mechanisms to make them more efficient and more profound. And I think there's certain tools that they use between stress inoculation and conditioning and training, and they can get the most out of you. But I think, yeah, I think you bring what you are, good, bad, and indifferent, to that community, and they utilize it in a unique way. I mean, I had that conversation with my wife last night that you get some guys who are, she jokingly just calls them misfits, and it's like, yeah, they're misfits. Like, people are messed up, but I think the special operations community in particular creates an environment where you can take that often maladapted and misshaped person and they can use that in the right way.
Well, and I think you have to have a certain kind of personality. You can't be a normal guy and do those kinds of jobs. It's not possible.
Yeah, I think there's certain aspects that are absolutely different. Not that other people aren't capable, but I think there's just a certain set of life experiences and maybe adaptations that will predispose somebody to that kind of thing, which I think you could say about a lot of different particular roles. I mean, between the military and law enforcement and things like that, I think there's certain things that predispose you to being drawn to that and then being good at it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I talked to someone last night. I told you I was kind of making some phone calls around, and I talked to Dave Lucas, and he actually went through SFAS with you. He told me to tell you hi,
Yeah.
but he said it was so long ago. I said, "What's a good story you got?" And he said it was so long ago, I can't even remember. Is that how
Yeah.
you're getting to in your life, where it's so long ago you really don't? Those are kind of small milestones in the road because it's so far away now.
Yeah. I remember Dave, we were in the field team together whenever we did small unit tactics training. And I remembered that and I remember his story, and I also had the luxury of being able to go look back at it because of his success in his career and where he's gone. And he's got some of that stuff like on his LinkedIn profile and things like that. I mean, he was exceptional in that phase because he had been an enlisted ranger before he became an officer. And so he led a lot of what we did. And he also, that's one of the most valuable things in the community too, is having prior enlisted guys, especially a prior enlisted ranger, because rangers are, I think, like the top tier of infantry guys doing that job. And from the lessons they learned from leadership and, the team structure and organization and just being a good teammate and friend, I think like you learn a lot of things. And having an officer who takes on that leadership responsibility, but understands what it's like to be a team member also in the enlisted role. Like, I remember him standing out in that regard. And yeah, there is a place. I mean, it's just like, my classmates from my Buds class and from the Q course. Like, there's snippets, your memory, especially whenever you have some brain injuries, maybe periods of time where you drank a little bit more than you should. I feel like your memory can play tricks on you. So there's parts of it that are tough, but yeah, I think the valuable things still stand out. The valuable people are still there, and those lessons are still contributing factors to a lot of what we do. I mean, I still remember conversations with people that shaped things I do today from 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting though to see that kind of stuff where these little snippets never, I won't say never, but they tend to mean less to us as we go. But then a conversation that you had is so important that you still think about it, you know, a lot in stuff in the past. You joined in 2003, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in high school, that's where you're at when 9/11 happens.
Yep.
And I try and talk to everyone about this because I think that we have really two different militaries from before 9/11 to after 9/11, and then with the extended out combat time of, over 20 years of warfare. When you're in high school and you see that, you already had the mindset of being in the military. Does that kind of embolden you when that happens and you think, I have something to contribute to this?
Oh yeah, we were the guys. myself and a couple of my friends who knew we were going into the military were like, dude, the war's kicking off. Like we can't even graduate high school for another year or two. Like we're going to miss the good part of this, just being dumb kids. So yeah, we were anxious to get to go.
With those guys, did they follow through on the military career too? And did you keep up with them throughout their careers?
Yeah, a few of them. I had a friend that became an infantryman in the Army, a friend who became a scout sniper in the Marine Corps. I think there was only a couple of another friend of mine joined the Marine Corps and ended up being a drill instructor and then a warrant officer. Like, yeah, a few of us, we definitely followed through and did careers in the military.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing to see when people are talking about it that young. Sometimes that goes through where they have an entire career, but the majority of the time they go in, they do their time, and they kind of go and become something else. So it's amazing to hear, that small group stayed in it through the entirety of it. Do you think without 9/11 and without that combat and you being what you did during that time of combat, your career is different without it? Do you think you stay in as long? Do you think you would enjoy it as much? Do you think that you maybe come away from it with a different perspective?
Oh, you'd absolutely come away from it with a different perspective. It's hard to speculate on too much to think if I would have stayed in or not. I knew I wanted to go into the military before 9/11. And whenever that happened, it made me want to go in even more because I knew we were going to go get to do the work. Little did any of us know going in what the consequences of doing that would be. So we were just looking at it through complete naivety. Like we just wanted to go get in the fight. And once we got the opportunity to get there, I mean, I think it's a multifaceted thing. You get wrapped up in trying to be great at your job, trying to be a great teammate, trying to balance your life as best you can while you're away. But then you go and you do the deployments and you do the job and we're lucky to have gotten the opportunity to do what we joined the military to do as combat arms and as special operators. And, you start bearing the consequences of it all and you start having to navigate through some of that as well. I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think that's one of the things Chris Free has helped navigate with operator syndrome. I think that's something that, it's shaped an entire generation, has shaped a lot of us in a substantial way. And I think I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the value that I have seen placed on life because I see life, I believe, in a way that few people that haven't seen those things get to appreciate as a medic and an operator, getting to see what every life has, the innate value to it, and especially the value and whenever you get to a firsthand role in taking it or preserving it.
And to drill down a little more, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you go in as a medic, no wartime, that military that's before 9/11, sure, you learn your job, you learn how to do what you're supposed to do. I think it's a completely different level when you're putting it into practice more times than not.
Yeah. Um, I agree. Yeah. It's, a thing that you learn to appreciate and relish, a thing that, I mean, the things that bear the most value to us in our life are the hardest things that we experience. And in that regard, I mean, even the challenging things that I had to work through, I have created a value now. And not only from the value that it established within me of the way I see human life and the way that I value my friendships and relationships that I have, but the understanding that I have of working through things and working through processes. Like I understand the detriment of alcohol abuse whenever you need to just use that to cover things up and to put it off and to hide it and to numb it for a while. Like I did that for a long time and I understand what that is now. And I am also fortunate enough to have had the experience to get to a dark place because I let the failures and the bad things stack up on me and drinking too much. And then having the support of people like Chris Free and my good friends and ultimately God's grace to preserve me to a point where I was able to walk away, turn away from it, walk away and go through like the hard process of acknowledging things and working through the memorials and the holidays, the, the events, seeing the family members doing all those things, like I got to experience the acknowledgement and working through the processes in a complete sober-minded state where I was able to understand what happened and why it happened the way it did, and kind of reframe a lot of those things to just see those processes we're supposed to go through emotionally and psychologically.
I think though, for the normal person that stands on the outside and looks into it, I don't think they understand the depth of what you're talking about there, of what those things, I would say, even scar onto the brain, the things that you see, the images that you can never get rid of, the weight of responsibility that we talked about. And I think that's where the disconnect happens with people that haven't done the jobs, or have never taken the time to kind of pay attention, unlike people like Chris Free that has spent the time to learn exactly what's going on in the mind. How do you think, with everything that you're doing with psychology, how do we break that line down and bring those people in without giving a little too much of ourselves? Because there's always that operational security. There's always that, or we got to keep people a little bit at bay. How do we do that?
I think you could talk about the consequence and the symptoms of such. And you can, I mean, America got a firsthand view at an ugly sight nobody should have to see just recently with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I mean, that was a brutal thing. Like, and I had a friend of mine send me the video, and my response was like, man, I wish I wouldn't have watched that, because it brought all that back like that. But, and I mean, I had like a physiological response to it, which was wild because nothing has affected me that way in a long time. But I think to create that appreciation for it for people outside, it's just, you understand who we are. You try to minimize comparison in the way that, you know, someone has the worst problem they've ever experienced in their life. Like, that's the worst thing they've ever experienced, and you can't compare it to yours. It's very real to them, and it's very hard and very challenging. And the best thing you can do is give them the tools and mechanisms that you discovered to get along the way and figure it out. I think the veteran community is particularly good at that. At least the guys that I know are, once somebody digs their way out of a hole, they regularly reach back and pull somebody out with them. And I think that's something we do well. And I mean, that has been kind of a guiding principle for me, is like, I want to take a lot of those lessons learned and a lot of those things that I figured out and take them to people who still need help and figure it out. And whatever their situation may be, I mean, it doesn't have to be combat, doesn't have to be just that brutal, traumatic thing that I experienced. But I think wherever they're at and whatever problem they're dealing with, like, there's a way to figure it out.
I want to talk about the Charlie Kirk thing a little bit, because it's strange in the conversations that we've had with each other to hear you say that you had a physiological effect to seeing that happen. What do you think it was about that event that brought that back so hard? Because I'm sure, I mean, they have that kind of stuff on Instagram, pictures like that, videos like that all the time. I mean, we are daily just a plethora of that is out on the internet. So why do you think it was, and what do you think it was about that incident that brought all that back so much?
I think it was different now because at the time I was in the military, I was fortunate to be in between marriages. I'll say it that way. So my first wife and son, I met my first wife in the Navy and had my son. And then shortly into my Army career, she realized that that was not for her. So she moved on, got remarried, had more kids. And I didn't get the opportunity to raise my first son the way that I wanted to, but always knew he was taken care of. And that afforded me the freedom to go do my job and not worry. Like, if worst case, something bad happened to me and I didn't come home, I knew he was at least taken care of. So I was only worried about myself at the time. And now I have since remarried almost 9 years, and I have 3 more sons. And so whenever I see something like that happen to a husband and a father, especially for, he was just a guy who had conversations and he was brutally murdered. So now it's different because it's not someone who understood the risk and understood the consequence and made the choice that all of us made to go do the job, realizing like, we're going to war and we may not come back. And that is a consequence that we accept to go do this job. Like, that guy sat down in front of a group of people with a microphone in his hand for no reason whatsoever should he have to be worried about getting killed doing that. Not in the United States, not under what we've established here. So I think the reason why it affected me that way was because of all the things I consider now, the context within which he existed, and also that's the America that we're all living in. I think a lot of people felt that very heavily because that happened, in the United States, like modern day right now. And that creates a scary environment for us to live in because I think most of us in most places, as long as you're not like in the heart of LA or maybe Chicago or Baltimore or something like that, you feel pretty safe. Like you should be able to go out and especially like a college campus, like I should be able to go, explore ideas and talk to people and debate and do things there, not worry about my life.
Yeah. With that though, I think the big thing about that is you're exactly right when you say that it's just a guy out there talking. And I think we've reached a really weird point in society where if you don't like someone's idea or you don't think that they have the right idea, people think that they can silence people and not just make them quiet, like take them off the playing field, And I wonder though, with a guy like you that spent as long as you did in combat fighting for this country, does it ever make you think this is what I was fighting for? I come back to this and this is what we spent all of that blood and that courage and all of that. This is what we did it for?
Yeah. I had that conversation with a friend of mine from the Navy a few days ago, and he called me and said those exact words. He's like, dude, this is what we preserved. This is what we protected and fought for. I'm like, yeah, man, there's bad people here and there. And I was like, the bad stuff's always going to happen. I try to understand the psychology as well as the history of just looking back throughout our civilization, look back as far as you can to everything and look at how people have been treated, the evil that's been done, the things. I mean, the American experiment that we are still trying to, you know, propel forward and keep going, like it always needs to be preserved. And it's at a shaky point right now. And I think, I mean, a lot of things happen within the last 5 years that have changed a lot about our country, just within the changeover of administrations and the things like that. And I am absolutely not giving any credit to one side more than the other. I think politics is a complete facade for what it is. That's a whole nother conversation. I think it takes an offensive action from all responsible and capable parties to preserve what we have. And I think the military outside of the borders of the United States, as far as we can keep it away, the federal and state and local law enforcement within the United States is like those folks take on the responsibility of preserving what we have. The ones who make the laws and the ones who enforce the laws, like that is a crucial thing to our society that we have to constantly maintain. So that's one of the things that's created the appreciation that I have for law enforcement. I mean, I grew up, again, it's kind of like you kind of talk trash and hate on like officers in the military because like that's just what you do. And, we kind of would talk trash about cops and, you say whatever you want about cops sometimes too. But the reality of that is the officers in the military, the ones who actually took care of me the best, like the most above my senior enlisted guys many times. And it took a few years being separated to really appreciate that and see it for what it is. But I look at the context within what law enforcement officers do now, and even the ones who I've had run-ins with, like you look at the job they do, the thankless job that is done, what they are fighting to do and preserve, as well as the fallout on themselves and their personal life. And for what? Like they're grossly underpaid. They're not supported with health or psychological or physical health the way that they should. And they are taking on one of the heaviest burdens within our society and what they do. So that's since 2020 with the most illogical, like defund the police thing, like that whole thing is like, that's completely changed the way that I look at that role and just what they preserve for our country and our civilization.
So let's get into your career. I want to ask you a song or a smell that takes you immediately back to a deployment.
Thanks to friends of mine, like the the Raiders and Recon guys that I got to know, you have silly songs like Kesha and like those girl pop songs that'll take you back because you want to. It was hilarious, but it's also like a undebatable thing that like that snaps me back right back to there because they play the most ridiculous songs, but it's like you got a bunch of like, I mean, jacked up, tattooed, gun hungry, gun toting hungry commandos going out to do work, like, and they play those funny songs before they go out. So I think that would be a song, a smell, being in a loadout room that smells like just the lumber that we had recently built it out of for our own cubbies, for our guns and our equipment. And it smells just like coffee and wood. And yeah, I think that'll snap me back to a place, foregoing some of the less pleasant smells of things burning and, the other parts that you.
I hope you don't run into those smells very often of burning garbage and stuff. So, all right, let's talk about your first deployment. You've spent all this time. You went to Buds. You did your time around the Navy. You come over to the Army. You get into Special Forces. You do all of your training, which your training is the absolute longest one of them all. You finally get that time. Do you remember sights, sounds, smells coming into your first deployment, landing into country?
Oh yeah. I mean, technically, I guess my first deployment was in the Navy, which was a weird time in my life because I was 18 and I ended up on a ship in the Northern Arabian Gulf protecting oil platforms. I was sitting on a gun and had no idea what was happening with my life. My second deployment, which was my first in the Army, actually another like non-standard kind of circumstance where I checked in the 3rd Special Forces group. The group command sergeant major at the time rounded a few of us up and he's like, hey, you guys are not going down to the battalion, company, or team level. Like, I'm not putting you on ODAs. Like, you guys are going straight over. I'm putting you in Bagram. So we went to Bagram, and for an unknown amount of time, it ended up being 9 months, but we were there and they're like, you're on the base defense plan, which I didn't understand. It's like, we're security for our special operations task force camp within Bagram proper. That's like guarded by the Air Force and, the other folks that are there guarding it. And it's like, we ended up spending a lot of time there, not gainfully employed, spent a lot of time in the gym, a lot of time on the range. I got lucky that I was a medic and I would kind of get pimped out to, the ODAs or the MSOTs or the SEAL platoons, whoever needed a guy because they had lost a medic or corpsman. Like, I could go fill in. So I got lucky that I got to go out and I got to spend, I got into my first gunfight with an MSOT down in Helmand province. And which the dudes, they had been recon guys who were, helped stand up MARSOC, and they were some of the first raiders. Those dudes were gangsters. It's like the most amazing thing to get into a gunfight with those guys right off because they were so cool and so smooth. As far as coming into the country first time and seeing that, yeah, I think we, flew right into Bagram, got off the plane there, and it was just surreal of what Bagram was and that city base that was there. Getting to go out, being on personal security detachments and just getting in common vehicles that were like up armored. That was like, yeah, they could probably withstand a gunshot here and there. Like, God help if any of those things blew up, because I know they didn't hold up for anything to that. But driving around through Kabul all the time, driving from Bagram to Kabul, did that a lot. And then, yeah, just getting an opportunity to go out across the special operations community. Like, I'm really grateful that I got to be there at a time for the global war on terrorism, like, because of the joint operations we all did and getting to work with the SEALs, the Recondos, the Raiders, the Rangers, like everybody, like ODAs across the regiment. Like, that was really an awesome opportunity to get to see how everybody did what they did.
Well, and you and I have talked before when I said that, a Green Beret medic is probably the best medic, hands down, anywhere in the world. And you actually gave credit to other guys that you said they're just as good as we are. Can we talk a little bit about that, of having that respect for those other groups?
Yeah, I mean, but the nature of things, like, whatever you do the most, you're the best at. And it's why, you can compare it to, like, look at special forces in particular. Like, your active duty SF teams are going to be a little better than your National Guard SF teams because they're doing the job all day, every day, where your National Guard guys are doing it less frequently. Well, I look at medics the same way. And again, I got the opportunity going through some advanced medical training and other training at one of the special mission units in the Army and working with Ranger medics and working with some medics from other communities. The guys who they're doing medical work focused specifically all day, every day for their career for however many years before they, while they're there, I guess, I realized that those guys ended up being a better medic than I was. The Ranger medics in particular are the ones that I was working with, because whenever you have a guy who goes through the Special Operations Combat Medic course, or they do the entire year-long Special Forces Medical Sergeants course, or SOIDCs that the corpsmen do now, whenever you go to an ODA, like, you're a guy on the team like everybody else. So you're doing what the team does. So if you're shooting, you're doing mobility training, you're doing rock climbing, whatever it may be, whatever your specialty thing is, you do that. You work on unconventional warfare, you work on whatever you're doing. That's your primary role, and your primary thing is what the team does. Like, you're an operator on the team like everybody else. And medicine becomes your second responsibility, that you have the personal responsibility of trying to keep up. Where if you're a Ranger medic, like, those guys they are a company medical asset where they are doing medical training. That's their garrison job, is medical training and being the medic all the time. So I think you have those focused guys like the corpsmen that are with Recon and with MARSOC, or your Ranger medics. I think those guys that are doing it all the time, they're just doing it more. So I think they get better at it.
Your first gunfight, you talk about getting into your first gunfight with the MARSOC guys.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember how you felt? Because I've heard a wide array. I've heard one guy has said on the show that he was completely nervous. He stopped. He put his hands, he said, "Hey, it's up to you, God." And then he was calm for the rest of it. Do you remember how you acted, or how you thought about acting?
Yeah, it was surreal how, I guess, anticlimactic it was for me. And I don't know if that was just a culmination of the stress inoculation or the training I'd gone through, or what it was, just maybe some disposition from early life. Maybe, I have no idea. But I think, like, I was expecting the movie version of gunfights. And whenever we got into it in the middle of the night, like, it kicked off and those dudes just started maneuvering and shooting and, eliminating targets. We moved through, we did our thing. Fight for a little bit, it'd calm down, it'd pick back up, and we went. And it wasn't a long sustained thing. It happened, a little bit throughout a couple of different positions that we were moving that night, but it was good. And it was also a cool experience. Like, I felt comfortable with those guys, that, like, the sky isn't falling around me. These guys are managing this. And it gave me an opportunity to, like, just kind of see and experience it and do it, and, like, to take part of myself. And just, it was very, very cool getting to do it that way the first time. And it was a very long time from then until my next gunfight. So, like, I don't know. I was thankful that I got to do it that way.
Let's kind of flip that coin. The first time you had to save someone's life.
Yeah. I worked on more Afghan commandos than really anybody else, or the Afghan military forces that were with us, because that was one of the benefits of the special forces role, is you get a partner force, which now, in looking back in retrospect, it's actually a really great thing to do. Like, let's get these guys to go fight for their own country. But worked on a lot of Afghans, and it's cool. Like, I didn't value their life any less. It was different working on an Afghan than it was an American, still, admittedly. But having the capability to save their life was cool. And I was thankful for the intensity and the depth of the medical training that I did in the Special Forces Medical Sergeants course. And I carried that back with me whenever I was an instructor there, because it prepares you very well. The mechanisms that they use to condition you to what you're doing, as well as, like, the proficiency they give you in what you're doing, it makes you very capable at what you're doing. If someone can be saved, you're probably going to save them. And being able to do that is an amazing feeling, and being able to do it and at times almost nonchalant. You're like, "Oh, I recognize this. Like, wipe this off, clean this up, put this on there. We'll bandage this. We'll do that. Like, yep, get this drug going on this guy." And, like, there you go. It's an awesome feeling to be able to save somebody. It's, it's exponentially worse when you can't, but
Well, let's talk about that. I want to talk about, I think we need to get into it because you and I have already talked about it a little bit, kind of offline, but let's talk about a patient that you lost and what it took to face your teammates after that.
Yeah, the worst one I think was our friend, and my friends all know this story well. Tico, Roberto Tico Skelp was our guy back in early 2014, and the context of us being there, there was an ODA who had been ambushed. It had killed one of the guys in the back of a truck. They just got an overwhelming ambush as they were just driving through this valley, and so our company commander, Chris Morris, phenomenal leader, was like, "Hey, like rally the troops. We're all going there." And so all the teams that were available to go, which I think all but like one or two teams in the company, like kind of just converged, and we got on that valley, and we were setting up, and we were in the district center, and Tico was our B team ops sergeant, so he was the one who was, because of some injuries, he wasn't going back to a team operationally at the time. But he was on the B team, still out there doing the job, just not taking on the same missions as an ODA. But he had gotten some intel that there was going to be an insider attack, and he was going around telling all of us that that was going to happen. And whenever the attack started, an Afghan grabbed a saw and started shooting into the crowd of us because so many of us were kind of together in one area. Started shooting into it. Tico was the first guy hit. He had been shot in the neck and the front of his right shoulder, and he went down. John Pelham was one of our SOD guys, our intel collection guys that was there with us, and he also was killed immediately. And then four other guys, to include one of my teammates, had been shot, not fatally. One or two of them pretty bad. My team, I heard the shooting, and there had been intermittent shooting and mortars and things like that throughout the day, so I didn't think too much into it. I was actually on the other side of a wall where I was trying to like rest for a little bit before we were going to kick out that night and go start running the missions. Whenever the shooting started, like I didn't think much of it, and I heard my team sergeant yell, like, "Y'all get over here!" And I just jumped up and grabbed my aid bag and ran over there, like ignorantly, like without my gun and my kit. I just grabbed my bag and I ran over to see what was going on. And I got a Tico first. There was another guy that was there already trying to like put pressure on him. He was another medic, like was trying to work on him, and he saw me come up and he just kind of like backed up and let me work on him. So I started working on Tico. Remember all the procedures I was trying to do to him. Like I remember looking at him, and it's one of those things kind of instinctively whenever I first got there, like he was looking straight up at me from the ground. He wasn't blinking. And I was like, I knew it was very unlikely that, anything good was going to happen from I got there, but I'm doing what I do. So I work on him until one of the other more senior medics, Wes, came over, and Wes kind of checked him out and was like, "Hey man, like he's done." And I put my fingers up to feel his pulse, and I felt his weak and thready pulse get weaker and weaker and weaker and stop. And because of the situation we were in, I got up and I grabbed my bag and I moved on to the next guy who was wounded, who was my teammate, Drew. Started IV on Drew, started giving him some medications, kind of helping fix up the dressings that had kind of been thrown on him in a way already, and just started prepping those guys to get Bedovac.
When that guy tells you it's over, what are the thoughts going through your head?
I didn't want to stop. I don't want to move on, but I'm trusting him as as a senior medic to me, who had also already lost his team sergeant in a previous deployment. So I trust but verify what he's saying, which is why I checked his pulse. And whenever I felt his pulse stop, it's like there's nothing else I can do now. But I can be useful to help somebody else. So I'm going to do that. And I was able to. I didn't really think much about the feeling of any of it until later. I was just thinking at the task at hand.
What made Tico so different?
Tico's personality and reputation were larger than most anyone that you could imagine. I mean, he was like this New York accent. He was a big dude. He was an amazing, like he had a reputation for being a well-established warfighter before any of us had even gotten a third group, and had the most amazing stories about doing the most gangster stuff. And had gone to do some SWIC instructor time, I think due primarily to an injury that he had sustained. And he came back and I think was not actually medically cleared to go to a team for that injury. So they put him on the B team as close as he could get, which was good. But he was like, because of his experience and his knowledge and his position in our company, he was kind of like the godfather to us all. Like, this dude has done it. He's experienced it. And you could go to him with any problem and he would figure it out. Like, he either knew immediately how to solve it or he would not end the day without an answer for you. And, and he was doing his role, like being an amazing guy at the time, because he was going around and telling us all, like, hey, I've got intel of an insider attack. Like, I don't know when or how this is happening, but like that's going to happen. Like, something's going to happen and it may already be here. So you guys, like, keep your heads up, keep your eyes open. Like, something's going down. The initial refuge to a lot of that situation was, I also knew that Tico was a believer. He regularly spent time reading his Bible and praying. So I knew that whenever he was taken from us, like, I knew where he was, and that even though I still had a substantial amount of the process to go through, I knew at the very least, like, I knew that he was in good hands.
Okay. There's a lot of stuff that we have to break down in this, and we're going to take it in sections.
Cool.
When you leave him to go work on someone else, you've just lost him. Right. How do you put your all into working on that next person? You just lost someone. That's the worst thing that can happen as a lifesaver or as someone that's there to do that. How do you snap through that and move right on to that next patient?
For me, it was like processing the sequences that we get in the medic course, where there wasn't really a lot of like time or need to process emotion at the time. It was like, what's the most logical next step? And it's like, I've procedurally worked through this thing. Like, I've done every intervention I know to do until, like, this patient's heart has stopped. I can't work on him anymore. So I do see a guy right there, less than 12 feet away, that I can go work on, who is screaming in pain, that I can go help. So I can do no more good here. So I'm going to go work on him. So I went over to him, started working on some bandages, and that was Drew, one of my teammates, who had been shot through the arm and it hit his side plate. That was the one thing that my team sergeant dictated, interestingly, because of his experience. He said, I don't care what you guys wear out on the mission. Like, you can patrol in blue jeans if you want, but everybody on this team will wear side plates, period. Because the guys always want to be light, right? You don't want to wear extra crap that you don't need. So dudes most of the time didn't want to wear their side plates, but he did say that we would do that. And that saved Drew's life. So he had been shot. The round went through his arm, hit him in the side plate. And then another round, I think, ricocheted up off the ground into his foot. So he had a tourniquet on his arm and I think a pressure dressing on his foot. And the only thing he was complaining about, the most painful part, was the tourniquet on his arm. But started an IV, gave him some ketamine. And at the time, I either didn't know or had forgotten that you could safely mix ketamine and Versed in the same syringe and administer it, which I really wish I would have done. But my thought was, like, this dude's in pain, but he's hemodynamically stable. He's not losing blood. He's going to be good. I'm going to put this dude in a K-hole. Like, I'm going to just take him out of this picture for right now. He doesn't need to be here for any of this. So I gave him a heavy dose of ketamine. And sure enough, all the things you see, his eyes did one of those. He started clicking his tongue, and I was like, that's right where I want him. I wish I would have gave him some Versed, because Versed pairs well. It relaxes you. It also causes an amnesic effect, and it'll take your memory out from the time you administer it. And I wish I would have done that. Fortunately, Drew, also a believer and an incredibly mentally strong person, didn't deal with that too poorly, that whole experience. So one of the things that I would have liked to do on more of my patients was give them Versed to, like, take their memory away from that, because I just think it gives you a better situation down the road. But I worked on Drew. And then fortunately, because, like I said, the entire company was there, we had some combat controllers who, like, those dudes are so amazing at what they do. Like, they had the medevac on the hook, and those guys started showing up as soon as possible, even though the medevac, also a testament to those guys' devotion to their job. The medevac pilots were told that they would not come to the valley we were in because it was too hot. And maybe rightfully so, because I think one of the snipers that was there with us shot a guy with an RPG aimed at one of the helicopters as it was coming in. So it was definitely a very hostile situation. But whenever the pilots got word over the radio that there were 6 Americans shot and like 4 needed an urgent like route out of there, like they weren't going to be stopped. So those guys, they spun up, they got there. We had PJs with us. We had like all the medics that were there. So it wasn't like a mass cal event by definition. It was just like we had 6 patients. So I think we had a bunch of medics. So everybody like had things like basically hemmed up pretty quickly.
You said in there, you just went on with the next procedure. You didn't really have time to process emotion. You just thought back on the training.
Right.
But I want to pose a question to you, and I want you to think about it for a minute. When you just process and you don't deal with a little bit of that emotion right when the moment's happening, you would agree that later on that emotion is way stronger because it's built up kind of in the time period of, when you get that adrenaline dump at the end and everything. Do you think that's a good thing that we don't teach to process emotion a little bit at a time? Because I think that's something that needs to be addressed a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to like pick and choose when you do it. And I mean, some guys, they don't have the control of that well of control. Excuse me. I think within the context of that situation, I think I was kind of glad that I didn't process any emotion right then and there because we had other stuff to do and other stuff to focus on. And it wouldn't have been advantageous to us to take a minute and process emotion. Like we had a lot of stuff to do. Could there have been an opportunity? Like, I think the first time is whenever we finished up our time in that valley a couple of days later, because by default, there's always a process of investigation. Like they'll hold you. We were there for like another day or two while, folks came out. They've got to do a very brief kind of cursory investigation, see what happened, what went down. It's a big deal. 2 guys got killed. 4 others got wounded. They came and they did all that. And then one of the only times we drove anywhere, I think it took us like 11 hours to drive back, but we drove back to the camp that we were at where we then were there, like putting things away, offloading, like we're back at the camp for a couple of days. I think that was the first opportunity where we should have processed some emotion for that. And I did a little bit. I had my battalion surgeon, has also become a friend of mine, Pete Chambers, was there. And my team sergeant tried to talk to me about it a little bit and we discussed it. And he's like, felt like I needed a little bit more. So he flew Pete out to our camp a couple of days later and I talked to Pete about it. Pete had some good talks with me about how to process things like that. Is a prior enlisted guy, a guy who had lost soldiers, lost friends, and also, in his position as the surgeon. He came out and discussed that with me a little bit about how I processed that. And those were opportunities to do it. I think I should have done it more thoroughly whenever I got back from that deployment and I got home would have been the best time, I think, to do it. But that's where I started deciding that, I didn't feel like it. I didn't want to do it and I wasn't ready for it. So I actually started drinking more than I should have and just kind of putting that off for a long time.
The other question that I have about the incident is we talk about processing emotion. When you see that it's an insider job and someone that they're supposed to trust you, you're supposed to trust them, and you're there fighting for their freedom, however you want to say it, and that happens, what kind of emotion does that put you through?
Yeah. I mean, at the time I remember just having such anger, just rage against everybody. And at one point you're like, what are we doing? Like, we want to kill everybody out here. Like, and I think a little bit of that got absolved by understanding later where that guy, very frequently it'll be someone who has a wife and kids, and one of the groups of bad guys will get a hold of them and either sometimes pay them money to do that, but more frequently they'll take family members hostage and say, like, you're going to do this knowing that it's going to kill you, but if you don't, we're going to kill all of them, or we're going to torture them, or we're going to do something way worse to them. So, I mean, you kind of see it like put yourself in that person's shoes. What would I do? I mean, I like to say that I would do something different, fortunate to not live in the situation where that does happen. But I mean, that's what happened to them. Um, so it's like you kind of just look at the situation objectively and you look at that and you're like, I mean, would you be willing to say like, kill my wife and kids, or I'm going to just go kill these Americans that I don't know from Adam? Like, I mean, I mean, I think that kind of puts it in a different frame.
Does that ever make you feel though when you go into that? Because here's where the I think the disconnect is for a lot of people. We talk about, well, they would have killed his family, his wife, his kids, whatever. But then Tico, and we'll talk about his sons a little later on.
Yeah.
They lost their father. So I mean, it's we're exchanging one for the other, and I get what you're saying about that. But do you ever, in your mind, when you think that way, and and I'm talking about when you first initially start thinking that way of, well, what would I do and things like that? Do you feel like you kind of, I don't know, go against your friend by thinking that way? I don't know the right word to use, but do you ever think like, man, I'm kind of dishonoring him by thinking this way? But then as you process through it, you're like, I mean, that is the logical thing to think.
Yeah. I mean, war's ugly, man. And people get manipulated, and that's even uglier. There's evil in the world, and it's unfortunate that it gets put into the situations that it does. I kind of go back to what I was saying with the whole Charlie Kirk incident is like those of us that put ourselves in a combat situation, like we understood the potential consequences of going there. We all understood that we very well could die doing that anytime that we went on a deployment. And we did the best we could to kill the bad guys and save the good guys. Um, I mean, I try to keep an objective view on what's going on. You know, the Tico's sons are a whole nother part of that I had a difficult time dealing with, and it was ended up good, but that was another substantial challenging thing that I had to work through for years.
So before we get into Tico's kids, I want to ask, what's the difference you think between fixing someone in the field, patching their wounds up, and then dealing with invisible wounds that are with you as you leave and come back to the real world?
The latter are a lot more complex, usually to figure out and resolve. I think we're definitely making some progress on the mechanisms that help, but I think we've got some good paradigms to recognize them for what they are now. I think, it started with, I think calling it post-traumatic stress it's definitely an improvement from calling it like battle fatigue or shell shock, right? I think we can look at it from like, okay, this thing calls this symptom. And then now we can even more adequately appreciate the interplay of physiology and psychology and how they feed and play off of one another through things like operator syndrome. And you can go through a process of figuring out the best mechanism for you to really figure that out and find some kind of peace or solution to what you need, because it's incredibly difficult even for the experts on this to understand if your consequences are from a massive amount of exposures and brain injuries or from a moral injury and, all additional like hormone imbalances and psychological fallout from what you experienced. Um, and a lot of times it's all of those together. So figuring out the unseen injuries, there's some great options now as far as looking at, like I did ketamine infusions was a thing for me because at the time I wasn't very comfortable with plant medicine yet. I know we've figured out a lot more. I know there's a lot more like really smart guys who have gotten involved in the process. And I think that's a viable option for some people now. I wasn't comfortable with it at the time because the way it was explained to me, there's like, hey, there's dudes going to Mexico and there's like some shaman taking them through something. I'm like, I'm not going to go do this like profound drug that's going to take me to a different world and with some shaman in the woods standing over me, like slapping me with a vine or something. Like, I don't, I wasn't, I wasn't cool with that. But, I mean, they're doing it now, like responsibly, like there's indications and contraindications. They're doing it in a medical setting. Like, and, there's guys who have done it, experience, they understand that it is not like a fix all instantaneously. Like, it opens up the opportunity for you to fix things. Like, it can give you a hard reset on your neurological system. It can give you like, there's neurological changes that happen in your brain, but there's, things that it can repair. And again, that's one modality of treatment. Ketamine was a great one for me. And if you want, we can kind of go through that. But that made a profound difference with me.
Let's talk about some of your injuries. I'm glad that you brought that up because I think the ketamine comes in kind of at the end to kind of, like you said, there's physical injury, moral injury, all of those kind of things. So I think the ketamine comes in at the tail end of that. Let's talk about, we talked about before the show that Jeff Darty has said you spent up all of your 9 lives, man. So let's talk about some of the injuries. And I want to talk the physical and the moral injuries that you did, but let's start off with the physical injuries that you suffered over your career.
Yeah, starting off, had some injuries from the Navy, from buds. It's kind of where the first like substantial injuries I ever had in my life came from. Then got through the Army, did my first deployment. Nothing actually, no major injuries on my first deployment, but there's also like this running joke, like to be an SF guy, you got to have like, at the time it was like, you got to have a sapphire ring, a Harley, and a divorce to be a real SF guy. So I bought the Harley on the deployment, my first deployment. And, I came back and I'd had my Harley for like 2 months and like this bike was awesome. It was beautiful. But, I'd had dinner with one of my good friends that night and I was headed home and there was a truck broken down and a dump truck, which this turns into me getting ran over by a dump truck over the years. But there was a dump truck broken down on the road. And whenever I came up on it, I didn't see it in time to swerve completely out of the way. So I wrecked into the back of this dump truck. It totaled the bike as it hit, and it threw me off the bike and it knocked me unconscious because like an idiot, I was wearing like, not a great helmet and like flip flops and, threw me off the bike and I landed on the passing lane unconscious and which wouldn't have been that bad. But then a drunk driver in a Dodge Ram came around. The first 2 cars that came up stopped. The guy jumped out of the dump truck, saw me, like wave the cars down. So 2 cars stopped. This drunk guy goes off the side of the road, goes around those cars, comes back up on the road just in time to run over me. He ran midline over my body. It broke my pelvis into 3 pieces, collapsed my lungs, broke all my ribs. Class 2 Lefort fracture, like broke my skull here and a basilar skull fracture. And it broke my left arm. And he drugged me down the road like 50 or 75 meters. And the dump truck driver had actually been a medic in the Army in Vietnam and ran up to me and knew I was dead as soon as he saw me and just started praying over my body. And the paramedics that showed up said that they and the law enforcement officers had never seen someone lose so much blood on the road and survive. So they put me in the ambulance. Fortunately, we're right down the street from Cape Fear Hospital in Fayetteville, where it took me into immediate trauma surgeries, like bilateral chest tubes, running, I think 11 or 12 units of blood. I got they did the trauma surgery and they saved my life. But because of the substantial injuries I had, they kept me in an induced coma for 2 weeks. And I actually had my good friend Nate, 2 of my other buddies who are Marine Raiders. My mom was there, and then Cody Alford, who's also a big personality these days. Cody was there, and that was the funniest thing is that the neurologist had told my mom, like, hey, listen, he had a substantial brain injury with all this. Like, we don't know what his status is going to be when and if he wakes up. So we're going to pull him off of, off the anesthesia or pull him off the medications and see what happens when he wakes up. So as I woke up, I'd open my eyes and I gained consciousness and I looked over at Cody and I flipped him off and then I passed back out. And they all were celebrating. They're like, that's exactly what Chad would do to Cody. Like, it's just amazing. He's going to be all right. And then, whenever they finally did pull me fully up out of, I gained complete lucid nature again. I was awake. They transferred me to the hospital on Fort Bragg where I spent a few weeks. I was in the hospital just under 2 months total. And I got out and I went right back to work.
Okay. There's a bunch of stuff we got to break down in there. Okay. So when you're in the hospital, and I want to ask this, and if you don't, you don't, but do you remember anything when you were in the coma? Do you remember anything that went through your head? Anything, or is that just a dark spot?
Yeah, I lost that whole month of my life. More so even than like the coma that they kept me in because of the head injury, I believe. Like, I don't remember the wreck. I remember a few events that night before the wreck. I don't remember the wreck itself. I I don't remember Cape Fear at all. I I have some memories that I'm not sure if they really happened, or like I remember certain nurses and certain people talking to me, and I don't know if they're fabrications or if they're real. There's like one or two where um I remember this guy, this dude with like dreads coming up to me, and it was like this very calming feeling, like him just telling me I was going to be okay. And I don't remember, like, it just stood out in my mind, and I don't even know if that really happened. Um, the first memories that I have whatsoever are being like waking up, being in the hospital in Womack Army Medical Center on Bragg, just being ready to get out of the hospital. Like, we're historically, like, medics in particular are terrible patients. Like, I'm telling the nurses what they can do better, and I'm like reprogramming all my machines so they'll quit beeping at me, and like I just want to get out and leave. Um, so yeah, I don't remember much. Fortunately, I don't remember a lot of the pain. That's a good mechanism your brain does for you. Um, yeah, I just remember being ready to go, and I do remember whenever they came in and they started discussing medical retirement with me in the military. Like, hey, so we want to go ahead and get, the paperwork started, and let's talk about this process of, getting this going with you medically separating. And I was like, I don't think that, I don't think that's going to be a thing. And I wish I would have been as brazen as like Nick Lavery was whenever he got shot up and he was in Walter Reed and he was like, get the hell out of my room. I wish I would have been that cool about it. But, I was just like, no, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to do that yet. And like,
Was there ever a point though, behind closed doors when no one's around, that you go, this might be over?
no, because I was blessed with such a great recovery that they actually, because I looked so bad, I mean, so much had happened to me and it was so bad that they sent me to the VA in Richmond, Virginia, to a rehab center where in process, they put me through 5 days of evaluation. And I still remember checking in because I walked in with a cast on my arm and I was like, I went up to the desk and the woman at the front desk was like, can I help you? I was like, yeah, I need to check in. And she was like, for what? I was like, to be a patient, I guess. They told me to come here. I don't know. She's like, okay. And this is a place where you have guys that are like face down on the bed that have to learn how to walk again and talk again. And it's like the worst casualty guys that they're trying to rehabilitate. And I went through their 5 day evaluation and they're like, you're good. You can go back. And I went back down to Fort Bragg and I didn't even take my convalescent leave. I just went right back to work. The one decision I did make was the team that I was on. So I had a great team sergeant. It was a great team. I was on the 3rd Battalion dive team. Because I was on a dive team, they like, hey man, like you can stay here to heal up. Like you can, we'll go easy. Like we won't expect anything much out of you, but like we like having you on the team. So like you can stay here, which I appreciate a lot more now than I did at the time. Um, but I was like, look, man, I don't feel that right about it. Like if I need to do my job, I don't feel like I can do that right now. Like I'm here, but I'm not capable of doing very much. So they gave me the opportunity to go to the operations detachment for the Advanced Skills Company, which is like I went to the dive locker where I maintained boats, worked on putting guys through pre-scuba to go to dive school, doing diver qualification trainings for the dive teams. And I worked there as like the dive medical technician on that, in that detachment for just under a year. I was there while I was able to rehab, heal back up, not deploy, and just kind of like get myself together. Um, I think I was there for about 10 months. And then I was able to go to 2nd Battalion to a dive team there. And I got to that team and started right back up training and doing deployments again.
You think because how many years do you got in now when all of this happens?
I went to that team the wreck was in September of 2011. So 8 years. Got back to an ODA in 2012.
And
So I was,
you're a staff sergeant at the time, right? Okay. So let me ask you, younger guy, that Navy guy, the one that got angry at the end with the entire, however you want to call it, the Buds fiasco, whatever you want to say, that guy compared to this guy, what's the difference in it? You think you take that time to heal up? Do you think that you know to stop? Do you think you know what to do if this were to happen back then?
yeah, I think I was looking at it as like I didn't have any more shots. I was like, if I leave now, like it's over, and like I'm not doing what I want to do. Like I still want to do more, and I mean maybe it was part of the head injury, or maybe it was just where I was at in my life. I was also one of the other like silver linings of that whole thing was I didn't know what I could do and what I couldn't do, and so I just had to try everything out. And I wasn't that mad about the situation because I did it to myself. Like, who am I going to be mad at? Like, I wrecked my bike, and like, yeah, I was angry with the guy that ran over me. Like, that is unfortunate.
Yeah,
I mean,
logically, I think that's a good thing to be mad about.
yeah, and I even went through like, I don't know how good of a procedure this is. Like, they put that guy's address on the police report, and they gave me a copy of it. So, yeah, down the road, I'm like, I looked at it, and I got in my truck one day, and I drove to the guy's house and sat out in front of his house, and I was like, do I need to do something right now? And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to go do something like bad for me and I'm going to go punish this guy? Like, this guy's like, and I looked around his house and thought about it. I'm like, this dude was driving home drunk at 11 o'clock that night down that road and he lives here. I'm like, this guy's life sucks already. So as angry as I was, I'm like, I was able to move on from it. I'm like, just at the time, I wasn't going to put myself at any more disadvantage to do what I wanted to do. Like, that didn't contribute to me accomplishing what I was set out to do. So I went there and I thought about it, but I went home and carried on with my life.
Let's talk about some more injuries.
Yeah, I had some combat injuries. I had in that same deployment where Tico was killed. Um, it was through the winter of 2013, and we came in on one mission. We were in I forget the name of the place. We had the commandos. We were all over the country, and I forget the name of the valley we were in. Like, historically bad. Nobody had been there in like 2 years. And we landed. As soon as we landed with, where two Chinooks would come in, drop us off with our commandos. They'd come in, and two more would land in the same spot and drop us off. As soon as we touched down at the very beginning, we started taking gunfire from like 3 or 4 different places across the valley. And that was the first time in that deployment where as soon as we landed, it kicked off. Because we would usually land and do this long offset and walk in forever, and then round guys up, and then fighting would start. But as soon as we landed, started getting engaged. So we went in, and where we landed on the top of this mountain, there was probably 700 or 800 feet down the side into this valley where you cross a wadi, and then you do another 700 or 800 feet up to the other side. And then on the other side is where they were engaging us from. And so as we started maneuvering, getting into our elements and maneuvering across, started going down that hill, and I hit a patch of ice and I started tumbling. And as I started kind of cartwheeling down the side of this mountain, I'm like, this is a really not ideal situation. And I hit at one point my right leg, and your knee bends this way, but my leg like bent this way. And so it tore my my ligament in my right knee, my lateral ligament. I'm a medic. I should know better. Anyway, I tore that ligament, and I got down, I fell a little further, and I got up, and I was like, I'm okay. And I think the adrenaline of the moment, because like we're still kind of in the fight. Like, I got up and I maneuvered through. We got down, crossed the wadi up, and it hurt, but I was like, I was movable. So I get up, and we get to our position where we're going to be for the day, and we know we're going to be fighting out of this spot. So we get like into a little hut, whatever. As soon as I set my bag down, I had an Air Force PJ with my element as well, and he had gone over to do some battle damage assessment somewhere else. So I drop my bag and I sit down, and like the pain hits me like that. I'm like, oh, this is bad. And I call him up on the radio, and I was like, hey dude, I'm in a bad way. Like, I need you to check me out. And he's like, yeah, give yourself some Toradol. I'll be back as soon as I can. I was like, okay. So I hit myself with some Toradol. I'm like, that didn't touch it. So he comes back and I'm like, at this point, I'm shaking. I'm in so much pain. I have no idea what I've done to myself. I feel like an idiot because I'm like, I did this to myself. This isn't like I didn't get shot or blown up, but this is one of the worst things I've ever felt. And he comes back and he's like, dude, like what's going on with you? And I was like, I don't know. Give me something now. So he starts to hit me with ketamine, and he is continuously giving me injections of ketamine throughout the day. And I remember, I can't remember the circumstance of why he did that, but I remember him pulling my kit and my shirt over and hitting me in the trap and injecting it there and just knocking me into a K-hole. So I'm like just hallucinating, watching shapes move through the room, and like it was weird. And then I would start getting light, and he would come, he would pull it over, and then he would hit me in the other trap and do it like and just put me back down. And it was a full day of doing that until he was almost out of his ketamine. And he's like, "Hey, dude, I'm almost out." And I'm like, "Take mine." And he was like, "Look." He had been a corpsman, a Navy corpsman working in a clinic or working in a hospital before he had been a PJ. He's like, look, I worked with an anesthetist. Like, I'm going to do a femoral block, which is he's going to take a lidocaine, hit me on the nerve and like on right next to my femoral artery, which is my concern. But he was going to numb my entire leg. He's like, hey, I'm gonna do that, and I'm like, I don't think you are. And he was like, trust me, like, I'm good at this. I was like, oh, whatever, okay. So sure enough, just by palpation, he was able to feel where my pulse was. He knew where the nerve was right next to it, and he hit it with lidocaine, and he was able to numb my entire leg. And he's like, because of the nature of where that fight was occurring, my team had to fight their way back down the hill through the wadi back up to where we had infield from and to fly out from there. They weren't able to fly us out all collectively where we were. So he's like, we got to medevac Chad. Like, we can't, like, he can't walk out like this. So again, dust off being the amazing medevac guys they are. My dog handler was with me, and he had gone out and he had cleared an area for the helicopter to land, like maybe 100 meters away. And whenever the helicopter came up, he's like, how clear is the backyard? And there was like this walled off backyard that I wouldn't have imagined a helicopter would have been able to land in at the time. And they were like, yeah, he takes the dog out and clears that real quick. And he's like, yeah, it's clear. I've got no indicators of any explosives here. And the helicopter pilot's like, I'm coming right there. And the dude, he came and landed in the backyard, like right there of where I was, so that we wouldn't have to expose ourselves any more than we did. And we had to wait until it was almost dark just because it was such a hostile area. And I remember my dog handler, Colin, was the one who like helped walk me to the helicopter and put me on the helicopter and like kissed my forehead and slapped me on the back and put me on the helicopter and walked off. And I remember it was an open, slick helicopter. There were two medics in there. And as we started to take off, they were asked me, like, hey, you're a medic, right? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, where are you hurt? And I was like, my right knee. And I felt like just such a coward at the time because I was like, this is not bad. I'm not shot. I'm not blown up. This is like the least nothing of an injury. Like this is embarrassing. I was like, yeah, it's this. And so they cut up the leg of my pants, looked at it, and they're like, I was like, I think I tore something in my knee, man. I don't know. Like I couldn't walk, and they have to walk out. They got to fight out. And they're like, what do you want for pain? And I was like, what do you got? And they're like, fentanyl. And I'm like, sounds good. So they hit me up with some fentanyl. Again, contributing further to the way I felt. The helicopter landed back in Bagram, and the team comes out of the hospital to get me. And I'm just like, good. I'm all right. Like, it's not that bad. And they like put me on the gurney and roll me in. So yeah, that was probably the worst of the I guess the combat injuries that I had, like, which wasn't directly inflicted by the enemy. So like it doesn't warrant a Purple Heart or anything like that. That was just, yeah. Other than that, it was like, I collected a bunch of frag over the years, a bunch of, RPGs and explosions and things like that. So it's probably a lot of mild TBIs to add up onto that. But
So let's go into the moral injuries. And we should probably start with when you're medevaced out, because I think that was probably a big moral injury, not for what you did, but for what you couldn't do.
yeah. Yeah. Knowing that, hey, my team was still fighting and I wasn't able to be there was like a disheartening feeling. They flew me back to Bagram and put me in a knee brace where I stayed for, I think, 4 or 6 weeks. Um, it was really interesting. There was another medic that had just come out of the Q course that they tried to put with my team, but like I was on a dive team, probably one of the best teams in our entire group. And this kid was like this fat kid that they put there. Like I don't know how he made it there, but they tried to send him to our team, and like he tried to sit down right off the hip and be like buddy with my team sergeant, who like took his long tab off of his uniform, and he's like, "You'll get that back whenever I see that you deserve it." And they went back and they put this kid through some trials and some tests, and they were like, "You are unacceptable to be on this team," and sent him back. But I'm getting word of all this like while I'm back in Bagram healing up. So I'm trying to figure out like probably a little earlier than I should have, but I'm like, I'm good to go. Like I need to go back to my team. I'm not going to leave them with somebody like that, and B, like I need to be there with my team because like we had lost our teammate, and I was like, we're not gonna be in that situation. Like I'm not gonna leave them without me through this, because we were getting at it pretty good through that entire trip. So talked to Pete, my battalion surgeon. I was like, hey man, I'm good to go. And he's like, I don't know if you're good yet. I'm like, trust me, like let's go to the gym and I'll show you. And we went to the gym and I showed him some things, and like I'm killing myself in pain, but I'm like, I'm good. I need to go back. And he's like, all right, man, I'm gonna trust your judgment on this. Like, you know, like if you don't need to go back, don't go back. Like we can put a good responsible medic there. And I'm like, nah, I'm good, bro. I'm good to go. So
I guess I'm wondering then, because you and I have talked a lot about the alcohol, drinking too much, masking things, trying to hide things. Nothing that you've really said other than maybe Tico's story has led to this. So I'm just trying to figure out how you slipped into this hole.
I think collectively between starting from, I mean, the very beginning of my career, like 18 years old and setting my sights on being a SEAL, and then that initial failure to me, like, again, that weighed heavy on me for a while. And that was something it took me years to work through. Then, I got married, had my first son from on the tail end of my Navy career. And that was another thing that I looked at as a failure, because I got into the Army and like not even through the Q course, and that fell apart. And my wife had left and took my son and moved back to New York, where she was from. I started drinking a little bit whenever that happened, to kind of to not deal with the feeling that I had about my wife and son being gone. But I was able to kind of stave off like drinking too much too frequently. Like I was still able to pass the medic course, which is a weird way of being proud of something I shouldn't be, but like I was still able to pass that course with as much as I was drinking at the time. But then I looked at my motorcycle wreck for a while. Like I blamed that on myself too, because I'm like, I shouldn't have been riding that night. Like, that was dumb. Like I think that was part of it, is like I blamed a lot of things on myself. I blamed a lot of my injuries on myself. I blamed Tico on myself up until right after I retired from the Army. I was medically retired in 2020, and I got a job working with a friend of mine at a local training company. And on the memorial of Tico's death that year, he and I went to Charlie Mike's, the bar in Fayetteville, and he and I got there first, and we were having a drink before everybody else showed up. And I forget how the conversation started, but I told him, I said, that was my fault. And he said, every single guy that was there that day feels the same way. He's like, that was my fault. Chris Morris, our company commander, feels like it was his fault. Chewy, my team sergeant, felt like it was his fault. Like every single guy there owned that. Like we all took responsibility for it. We all felt it. And I'd never comprehended that. I never even thought of it until that night, whenever he told me, like, we all felt that way. I was like, yeah, but I was a medic working on him. And he's like, dude, you're a fucking good medic. Like, that wasn't on you. It's like, yeah, that's. Later on that night, Tico's sons showed up, and that was something that Pete had told me about whenever he had lost one of his guys. He had been a physician, and one of his enlisted guy was there, and this kid really wanted to go out on a mission. And so Pete switched seats with him, switched trucks with him, and he put that kid in his seat that he was supposed to have, and that truck got blown up and that kid got killed. And Pete said part of the process for him was he went to that kid's mom and apologized, and the mom told him, like, this is not your fault. And that gave him peace. And I'm like, maybe I need to do that. So I held that for a while. And I saw Tico's sons multiple times at different memorial events and things over the years, until that night that I was at Charlie Mike's. And they came in and I was like, I think I'm ready to do this now. And it was, 6 or 7 years since it had happened. And I went up to one of his sons that was there, the oldest of the two sons. And I was like, hey, look, man, I'm the medic that worked on your dad. I just want to tell you I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, man, that was a bad day. That was some bad stuff that happened. Like, you guys really faced a lot. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. And it hit me like right then and there. I'm like, that kid has no idea. Like, this has all been in here the whole time. This doesn't have anything to do with him. He's thankful we were there. He understand, respect, and loved his dad, like appreciated and honored what he did. And he doesn't hold anything against me. But I mean, the kid was like 20 something and what did he know? He didn't hold it against me. I was still very substantially holding it against myself. And, I guess that in its own way was good for me to see, is like, they didn't hold it against me.
Why do you think you held it against yourself?
Because I thought if I was such a good medic, I should have been able to save him. And it's one of those things, like the conflict in my head is like, there's a part of my brain that tells me that, like, I did the right things. And like, it's like that logical side of like, I did the right things. I went through everything. I'm pretty good at what I do. And if he was savable, I would have saved him. And even talking to Pete was there as a physician. He was there at the autopsy that they did in Bagram. And he was like, yeah, that round that hit him in the shoulder, we thought it was just like a simple gunshot wound. Like, I thought the major bleeding thing was his neck. He's like, that round that hit him in the shoulder spun through his chest and he was bleeding out internally. He's like, there wasn't anything you could have done about that. Even knowing that, I'm like, I could have tried something else. I should have tried something more. Like, he had just had a daughter. And so there's that other like emotional side of my brain that's like, I could have done something more. Like, there's a chance. Like, worse guys have been saved. Like, I've seen guys that got both arms and both legs blown off. And like, I've seen all these chaotic stories. I mean, there's been worse guys saved from worse things. And it's like, why didn't I?
I guess the question that comes to my mind is, at that point in your career, when Tico dies and you blame yourself for it, how many people do you think you had saved at that point?
A few. But it's easy to downplay your successes and focus on your failures.
But I'm just wondering, and with your background in psychology now, when you look back on it, why do you think you did it?
I don't know. I think there's a part of us that focuses on failures, and it's an unhealthy characteristic. And I think it may be tied to how we determine our worth at what we do. And I think I was trying to talk myself out of where I was at, maybe. I don't know. I think I didn't, for the longest time, whenever I would think about it, I would just drink and then not worry about it. Like, it's easier to deal with whenever it's not that intense. So there's not really a great explanation, for making a poor choice and just harboring that negativity and that feeling for so long. I don't know.
I think it's also interesting, though, that you said, the oldest son was in his 20s, but what did he know? I think we need to put in context about where you were in your life when that happened, about what age you were at when that happened.
Yeah, that was 2014. So Yeah. I was almost 30. I was in my late 20s.
Late
So
20s. But
I
you see
wasn't
what
far
I'm
off.
saying?
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
You gotta, I don't think at that point you knew to cut yourself a break. I think you've learned that later on down the road. Like I said, though, and I've said it to you a bunch of times when we've talked, is I guess I'm just not understanding with Tico. There were other failures in your career. There were other failures in saving somebody, but it never quite affected you the way it did. I don't know if you grew. Do you think you grew and you learned to, like you said, cut off that emotion of it?
No, I don't think I cut off the emotion of it. I think I started framing it differently. I started to understand it. I mean, like you said, I mean, I was a 29-year-old kid. Um, and I never hesitated from biting off more than I could chew from the very beginning of enlistment at 17. Um, I think I held that burden really closely because of who Tico was to us. I felt like I lost this incredible figure that we had. Like, that's my fault. Whenever it's like, A, God ordained that before we were born. B, there was a collective set of things that happened that day that led to that occurring. I mean, little decisions that could have been better that contributed to all that. So whenever it did happen, it's like I didn't have a chance to save him, and I think just understanding that and appreciating the reality of like we make this choice, we risk this, and sometimes you lose. Sometimes good men will die. I think the reality of that fallout was tougher than I anticipated.
Let me ask you, do you think at any point when all of this is going on, whether through this time or through the growth time, you think you ever lost your faith a little bit?
I think it's the only thing that I held on to that kept me going. I had I was half in, half out for a long time. I was raised in a religious family, in a Christian family. Um, at 17, whenever I left home, I was like, I'm out on my own, doing my own thing. I quit going to church, wasn't really reading the Bible or practicing any of it that much. Um, I had gotten to a point in my life right before my motorcycle wreck that I actually spent I think it was like 2 weeks where I was like, I was an atheist for 2 weeks. It was like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, God's a fairy tale. God is how we just explain the unexplainable. I'm like, whenever I get valid proof that I can't disprove, then I'll believe in God again. But I don't need this. And then about 2 weeks later, my motorcycle wreck happened. And after I regained consciousness down the road and I came back, I was able to look at the medical report. It's only because I was a medic and I looked at the report of what happened to me. I had injuries that should have killed me, like things that I had no explainable reason for surviving, but I did. Like, I tested God, and that was not a good idea. I should not have done that. And I understood that I had been given another chance. So I feel like my motorcycle wreck was an opportunity for me to kind of get things straight with God. So then whenever that thing happened with Tico, like I appreciated that it happened like on God's timeline and accepting that that was his fate. That was the end of his road on this planet. I believe that that was a preordained thing, that God had chosen that time for that to happen. But I wanted to hang on to some responsibility. Like I had more of a say in it than I did.
When do you think it got the worst?
I think whenever there began to be a culmination of things that started slowing down, ultimately ending my career, is whenever it got the worst. Because I did, like I said, one of the luxuries coming out of my motorcycle wreck and having the list of injuries that I had like the severe brain injury, all the other injuries I had, was I didn't know what I was capable of doing and not doing. But I somehow found my way onto an amazing ODA, like one of the best teams that I'd ever seen, with like some amazingly physically fit, strong, like very amazing, capable operators. And continued pushing, like continued going as hard as far as I could. I tried out to be a direct support medic at the special mission unit here at Bragg and got the job. Like the sergeant major at the time didn't want to hire me and actually called me in. He's like, "Hey, let's sit down and discuss this." So I went in to the visitor center. We sat down. He's like, "Look, man, like I looked over your record and looked at your injuries from your motorcycle wreck, and that was not a small deal. Like this job is intense and it will take everything from you. And I can't bring you here and hire you and train you to be here in a squadron. And then your body doesn't hold up. And now I'm grabbing my kit and going out because your body doesn't support it." And I told him that, look, I have done the test that you give successfully, like and performed above standard in the screening test that you have to come get this job. And I wouldn't apply to come work here if I was going to be a liability. I've been on an amazing team. I've done combat deployments since then, and I have performed successfully throughout all of that. And that's why I'm here today. And he thought about it for a minute. And he's like, "Look, I like you. So I'm going to give you a shot. But the course that you have to go through is ultimately going to dictate what happens here, which is the operator's training course." And going through that, where even though I was there to be a direct support medic, you still do a lot of all the same things, all of the driving, the climbing, a lot of the shooting, all the things you do very similar to everybody that's going to be an operational part of that unit. And I got almost all the way through that course. And right at the tail end of it, they pulled me from training and they said, "Hey, look, like you're not performing at the level that we need here. Like we all have no doubts of your medical capability." And interestingly, one of the cool things is he said, "Something happened with you that doesn't happen here very often." And there was actually an argument over you. Like the instructors that have to determine your fate, there's a couple of them that really want you here. There's also a couple of them that really don't want you here. So ultimately, like your time here is done. So we're like, not leaving on bad terms, but you're not staying here. So ended up going back to 3rd SF group and kind of like hunted around for a job. I had a little time. They gave me kind of a buffer between leaving the course and going back. So looked for ODAs. 3rd group was creating a medical rescue detachment. I went there and I did that for about a year until they deemed that wasn't really a capability they wanted to hang on to, which was great. I got to do a bunch of exceptional further medical training there and like prolonged field care and, worked in a lot of ICUs and other like long-term patient treatment and care. And then I got to go be a dog handler, which they usually never allow medics to do that. But the kennel master at the time said that, like my dog handlers need to remain proficient in their medical cross training like any team member here. So they brought me down to the kennels and allowed me to go through the dog handler course, become a multi-purpose canine handler. And I got to a point where like the injuries caught up with me and I started questioning my ability to do my job. So it got to a point where like, yeah, I think this is time. Like, I think this is done. And I still like begrudgingly went through the process. I remember going to the chiropractor, the orthopedist was the first physician I saw. And he was the one who was going to start the med board for me to medically retire. And he's like, "Okay, I'll ask you a question. If I put your helmet and your body armor and I give you a weapon and you send you out to go do a job, like, what are you going to do?" And I was like, "I'm going to do my job." And he kind of laughed at me and he's like, "You have to tell me you can't do this job anymore." I was like, "Oh, that's how this starts?" He's like, "Yeah, that's it." I'm like, "I don't think I can do this job anymore." And he's like, "That's what I needed to hear." And I started the process. That it got a little deeper and darker after my med retirement, where I understand some of the things that happened. I had never been suicidal in my entire life before or since then. But I did an event. A teammate of mine invited me to do this prolonged endurance event, the stand-up paddleboard, through an amazing organization, Open Water. They do great things for veterans and first responders. But you do the stand-up paddleboard or you can do a prone paddleboard, but you start on Catalina Island and you go 32 miles into Huntington Beach. And it takes 8 to 10 hours depending on what the water's like. But I went out there the first year and I was drinking too much. I underestimated what it was. I didn't actually train up that well for it. And I got 12 miles into it and I was on my knees. I couldn't even stand up on the board, on the paddleboard. And I was like bleeding on my knees from the friction. I'm like, this is like, I can't do this. Like, my hips were aching, my body hurt. And I'm like, this isn't working. I can't do this for the rest of this thing. And so I had to drop out of it and they pulled me out. And as soon as they pulled me up on the boat, they're like, hey man, look, this happens, dude. This is not a big deal. Like, it's whatever, bro. Like, we'll figure it out. And it's these super cool surfers and like watermen and just people around the water that are like the most loving, encouraging people that like circle around you. And I'm like, these people did nothing but love and support me and bring me out here, and I've failed them. And the next day, everyone's talking about how great it is, and they crushed it. They completed this thing. And I'm like, I'm going to add this to my list of failures. Like, let's go all the way back to like 17-year-old Chad back in the Navy. Like, I failed that. Like, and then the next thing I failed this and I failed that and I failed my marriage, my first marriage, and I failed Tico and I failed, the amazing opportunity I had to go work at that unit on Brack. And I failed all these things. And so I did what I'd always done and I started drinking. And I got that night, I got to the point where I was like, I'm done with all this. I'm done with these failures. And fortunately for me, I did pick up the phone and I called Chris Free. And I've been connected with him a year earlier. And I called him and I'm like, Chris, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, okay, tell me about it. And we talked for a few minutes and he talked me off the ledge. And he's like, okay. So at the end of the conversation, he's like, you good? You're not going to go back out tonight. I'm like, nah, man, I'm going to get some rest. And I went to sleep and I got up the next day and, Danny, one of the guys who started Open Water, was like, hey dude, like, we love you. Whenever you get home, call me. And I got back, I called him. He got me into AA, where I did a couple of AA meetings that 2 or 3 were good. I didn't stay with that. That wasn't the thing for me, but I took an entire year off from drinking. Like, I stayed sober for a year because fortunately for me, the way I looked at it was I have sons and nothing is going to prevent me from raising my kids. Not even myself. I'm not going to let that happen. So with that being like the consequence, like, I was able to completely stop. And that year was one of the best years of my life because I was able to go through the memorials, go through the holidays, go through the retirements and all the ceremonies and all the things, and acknowledge what I needed to acknowledge and address it and feel all the feelings and go through all the things. And having done that, I completely reappraised my relationship with alcohol, because I'd never had a healthy relationship with alcohol. And partially like the culture lended to it a little bit that I worked in the military. But I think like I always looked at it like, this is a good time, so I'm going to do this as much as I want. But I reframed how I look at alcohol and the detriment that it causes you. And I looked at it for what I'd been using it for the past 17 years. And having allowed myself to fully and completely process through all of those things, reframe how I look at alcohol, I was able to come out after that year as I felt like I was a more complete whole person. I was able to heal from a lot of those things because I needed to go through that. And I remember a conversation I had with a friend of mine who recently retired out of SEAL Team 6. He's a Master Chief there and another substantial human being. And he came up to me at one of the retirements up in Virginia Beach. And I went to this thing sober, and it was like an entire day of drinking and celebrating. And it started on the compound, like at the ceremony, they're having beers, and then we go from bar to bar to bar. And we were at one and like 10 o'clock that night. And he comes up to me and he's like, I noticed you're not drinking. And he was the only person who said anything about it all day. I was like, yeah, man, I'm taking a break. He's like, I get it. He's like, is it helping? And I'm like, I'm going through the things I have to. He's like, is it necessary? And I'm like, if you don't, then you start spewing out all that venom onto your kids and your wife and your family. I'm like, yes, eventually you have to. You got to work it out. He just gave me a pat on the back and walked away. I think it's a part of the process.
That night when it got so bad that you called Chris, were you thinking about your family at all that night?
Yeah, but the frame of mind that I was in because I was drunk, which is another thing, like every friend that I've had that has committed suicide has been drunk whenever they did it or on multiple substances. Yeah, the frame of mind I was in and the distortion because of the alcohol, I was thinking that I'm just going to fail them too.
Was there ever a moment when all of these failures and this list of failures comes up? Did you ever think about any of the positive stuff that you done? Did your brain ever try and kind of self-correct and say, okay, yeah, there's these failures, but there's this, or it wasn't even a thought?
No, my brain was telling me that all the successes that I had were luck or they were the generosity of the people around me.
So in that year's time frame when you're, reframing your whole outlook on life, how many of those failures do you cross off the list?
I reappraised a lot of them because I look at things for what they were and I was able to see it like the understanding that I had of like we are creatures of body, soul, and spirit. And I think there are times that all three of those have to be perfectly aligned for you to be successful in some of the incredible endeavors I undertook. And there were times where I was physically not there, like my body was not where it should have been. I mean, whenever I look at the OTC, like my body and probably my brain, my cognitive health was not where it should have been. Um, and the mode that I was in at the time was like, I'm just going to go as fast and as hard as everything I possibly can until I burn out. And I'll just go as far as I can and figure it out. And so that's as far as I've made it, was there. I look at a lot of those failures and I realize that all of those things weren't for me. Nothing against any of the SEALs that I know. I've got some friends in the teams that are amazing human beings, and there are some amazingly awesome guys there, like some of the best operators in the world. But that wasn't for me. Like that community wasn't for me. I found my place in SF, and that was more for me. Like that, I don't think I would have ever become a medic had I not gone to the Army and gone into SF. The option was there, but I don't think I would have been drawn to it as much. And I started to understand that some things weren't for me, some things I wasn't prepared for, some things I thought I really wanted. And then in practicality, I got there and I'm like, the idea of this is more of what I wanted than actually this thing. And that's a distinguishing thing you got to figure out about a lot of things is like, I thought I wanted this thing, but it was the idea of this thing I wanted because in actuality, like this is not what I want. And
What's an example of that?
there were things that I chased in the Army, like certain qualifications and certain schools and capabilities that I'm like, hey, I think I really want to do this. And I would train up and I would go to do it. And I'm like, and I would learn about what it is. And I'm like, and I would get there and start doing it. I'm like, this isn't actually interesting to me at all. Like, this isn't what I want to do. Like, it's the perception of what this is that I thought I wanted.
You think you
So
really wanted to be special missions?
I put that as, yeah, I think I really wanted that because I think that was to me, and I still believe that, like, I think the best medics in the Army and around like more branches are getting to go there now, but I think the best medics in the military go there. I think the significance of the missions that the tier 1 units get allows them to get the resources and the personnel that they get because they're so prioritized at the national level of significance. So that being the top of what it was, I think like I absolutely wanted to do that. And I don't think that I failed to solidify my position there because I didn't want it. I think that I'm at the limitation that my mind and body had due to the damage that I had sustained throughout my career.
So when you decide that it's time to get out, I want to know what the thought was because the guy tells you, what would you do if I gave you kit, weapon, helmet? You said, I go out and do my job. And he said, that's not what we're doing here. This is what you have to do.
Yeah.
What was the thought that made you say, or what was the thing that finally pushed you over that you said, you're right, I'm done? Because that's not something that you would say.
It was similar to whenever the ODA that I was on, whenever I had my motorcycle wreck, was going to allow me to stay there. And I decided that it was in our best interest for me to not stay there. I didn't feel like I was physically and mentally able to do the job anymore. On top of that, I had gotten married and I had a wife then. And so the military was rapidly becoming a bad situation for my family. And I wasn't confident that I could perform at the level that I needed to anymore. And there also became a situation where they wanted to send me away from third group. And I was on the list of medics who may be getting sent to a training command out at Fort Irwin, where I was going to be out there just doing training for my last few years. And I'm like, this situation isn't going to be good for my family. I'm not sure I can even do this job anymore. I'm like, there's becoming like a very substantial list of reasons why I don't need to be here anymore. So, yeah.
No, go ahead. I want you to finish that because I think there's more to it.
Yeah, there was in discussions with my wife, like what we wanted, what I had done, and where I was going. I felt like I had met the terminal velocity of progression in the military. And I think I had hit a place where if I stayed, I was just going to ride out my time until retirement. And it became better for me out of the Army than in. There was more opportunity and more advantage to me being out than there was it being in.
You think you were bitter at all when that decision comes up?
I was a little bitter that I was put in a position where I was going to have to leave third group and go out to that training command. I was pretty upset about that. And of course, like they do, I mean, the command sergeant major tried to convince me of how great of an idea and opportunity it was professionally. Like, you're definitely going to get promoted and like, you're going to contribute something really great to the regiment by being here. And it's like, I didn't come here for that. Like, I came here to be an operator in this unit. I came here to be a commando. Like, if I'm not doing my job here, then I don't have a job here.
I guess I want to ask, when you strip away everything, when you take away the rank, the medals, the uniform, and you really have to take a look at yourself when all this is over, who are you? Because you've gone through major changes about 3 times during your career.
Yeah, I became, because of those experiences, I learned to put less faith in myself and more faith in God. I learned that I do not make it the first few steps down any path without my teammates and the people that support me. I learned how to prioritize what mattered. And one of the things that I take, because I had so many failures and so many things, well, not failures. I don't even want to call them that anymore. I had so many learning experiences and so many things that didn't come to fruition that I thought I wanted in the military. I learned to value the things that I was. And the one thing that I took away from the military is that I was reliable. I was always there. Anytime anybody ever needed me, whether it was somebody that was wounded in combat or a teammate needed to call somebody in the middle of the night because they needed to talk, or they needed some help with something, or they needed somebody to pick their kid up, or whatever they needed, like, I was always there. And I learned to value those innate qualities that I had, and that I was always going to be there, which is something that the military never controlled and never dictated.
Did you like who you saw in the mirror?
At times I didn't, and that was part of the process of that, taking that year off from drinking. I learned to be proud of myself. I had to learn to be proud of what I did in the military. And this was something that Chris Free kind of tuned me into, is that there are a lot of guys who leave the special operations community and they don't even have retirement ceremonies because they don't feel like they actually succeeded as well as they could have. And they're like, just wrap it up, man. I'm just done. Like, I don't want any fanfare. I'm out. And more guys, they refuse to allow anyone to celebrate them whenever they were incredibly successful. I mean, you're talking about guys that were Green Berets and SEALs and, I mean, operators across SOCOM or combat arms guys in the military, or really anybody that made a decision to serve in any respect. Like, you should be proud of yourself.
Right, but that wasn't you for a long time. I mean, your list of failures way outgrew your successes. And even I would say even your successes were luck or from someone else giving it to you. So why do you
Right.
think guys fall into that? There's got to be some kind of, and I'm asking from a psychological angle to you, there's got to be some kind of mitigating circumstance that those guys fall into that.
I think that back to, I think, a thing that we discussed very early on is there is a maladaptive nature to a lot of guys drawn to things like this. I think there are very few guys in this community that are completely well-rounded, brilliant, successful guys with a good mom and dad that raised them up in a good family environment, and things were just like ideal in their entire life. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to go be a commando and I'm going to go kill bad guys for a living. And they get drawn to this life. I think there's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of neglect. There is a lot of child and adolescent issues that come here. And I think, at least for myself anyway, I think that feeds into or fed into a lot of the things where getting into the military and becoming these things, the reason why not making it through SEAL training was so devastating was I equated that to being worthy of being a man. Like, if I can do that, then I'm worthwhile. I have to do that to be worth something. And so then whenever I came, you get into the community and you like, I think that's where imposter syndrome kind of stems from in the same regard. And it's like, am I worth even being here? Okay, well, I did this much, but I see that guy over there and look at how much more he's done. Look at how many more badges he has, or look at many more deployments he's got, or whatever it may be. It's like, that's actually what it is. Like, I need to go chase that now. And you keep kicking that can down the road of like, but there's this one more thing.
So do you think that there's ever a point, or do you know the point in your life where you said, yeah, I'm a man. I'm a good man. I've done what I'm supposed to do.
Whenever I started seeing that I'd earned the respect of people around me, whenever people that I respected started respecting me, I was like, I think I must be something. I think I've gotten somewhere. And whenever I would hear people tell other people about me, in front of me or not, and whenever respectable people respected me, I was like, I think I must be something. I must have made it somewhere. Or someone introduces me in like a really awesome way. It's like, hey, this is Chad. He has done this. He is this guy. And I'm like, stop. don't say all that. But it's like, it was true. Like, and even at that, I think it started there, but it still took some time after I left the military for me to learn to be proud of myself. I think that was a benefit that I had of working at a company I did, because when I first retired, I went to teach as a medic instructor at the Special Operations Medical Training Center, where I taught Trauma 1 and Trauma 3. It was the most amazing job, getting to train those guys coming in to be new soft medics, like getting to mentor them and to offload lessons learned onto them and prepare them for the job. Like, that was an amazing role. Like, I love that job. It's an amazing community. And I did that job right up until I would have been at about 20 years, like within the military. And then I got a chance to go work at a defense contract consulting firm. And that was my first job working with civilians in my entire life exclusively out of the military. And we supported the military, but it was working, in the corporate America, I guess. Seeing who I was there helped me further appreciate who I was. And just because I'd never seen outside of the military, like having enlisted at 17, and then even that first job, I was back right with the military training again. Being in a civilian organization, seeing the way people are and the way people operate and who I was contrasted to them, I'm like, I see so much for what it is now.
I almost wonder though, did you turn out to be, when you saw this, and once again we're talking about how happy you are about your professional life, but the underlying thing that we've talked about this whole conversation is you said at your lowest point, I'm going to raise my boys. Nothing's going to stop me from doing that. Do you think that you fulfilled that prophecy of no one's going to stop me? And do you think you did what you set out to do? Or do you think there's still more to happen to do that?
I think life is a continual progression until you die. If you make it that, it's either you're either progressing or digressing and fading and becoming less, one or the other. And I've continued that progression. I think I've fulfilled the prophecy, and I took the 17 years I had in the military that shaped me into the way it has. I learned how to frame those things to be constructive parts of who I am and things that I can contribute to making me a better husband and a better father. I'm taking the lessons learned now through the company that I've created, and I'm taking the things that I learned the hard way, the life lessons learned, and applying them to people that can bear benefit to that. Because throughout my 20s and 30s, I have consistently bitten off more than I could chew and learned a lot of those lessons. And I've learned the mechanisms, and I've learned the things that help you get through them, help you resolve them, and make you a better, more substantial person at that. I think it's given me an incredible opportunity to be a leader for my family, for my church group, to mentor folks that are coming up right behind me, to raise my sons, because I've got 4 sons. I've got one in college who's doing amazing. He's doing a pre-med degree in Charlotte. And I have a 5-year-old and 3-year-old twins. And the fact that, I kind of went against the typical thing, like I went the soft curse, right? And I had boys, but I get to raise them to be men. And that's a thing that I learned in the Army, because Special Forces, a lot of that role is being a teacher, because you're often training a partner force to work with you. So you do a lot of training and teaching, and nothing teaches you something better than having, once you've taught it. And I'm teaching my sons to be men. So I'm learning even now how to be a better man from training and teaching them how to be men.
What's the one thing you want your boys and your wife to remember when this is all over and you're gone off this earth? What's the one thing you want them to remember about you?
That I sacrificially served God by serving my wife and sons, my friends, my teammates, and my country. And that is the best way to approach anything that they will pursue, is in the lens of what God has for them to do. Because that fact has allowed me to understand that the Navy and the Army could not have assigned any more value to me than I had already within me. And that was a God-given thing. And I don't want my sons to feel like they have to go struggle and fight through and accomplish things and prove things to have to establish and earn or recognize some value. Like, that value is innate. It's already there. So it is theirs to use at their will, and they can go pursue whatever they want with it. That's what I want them to know, is that they don't have to fight through all these things that I went through and bear all the consequences and learn those lessons the hard way. They've already got it.
And how about your wife?
I want my wife to know she is the best thing that's ever happened to me. But that I loved and worked for her sacrificially. Man, I could do a whole hour talking about that. I want her to know that I want her to see me as what a man should be, which I'm continuously trying every day to be, but someone that her and my sons could look up to and respect and appreciate.
All right, final question until we find out what you're doing now. What's the one truth about war that you think the public's not ready to hear yet?
I think war is macro, big picture, I think it's two groups of people that think they're doing the right thing, fighting against each other to prove that they're right, and they're going to kill the other side, and they're going to establish their correct place where they're at. I think that the public is, the nuances of it are, they are not aware, nor will they ever be, having not experienced it firsthand, the blessing and the curse that war can be. And I lend to that with the appreciation and love that I have for life, for the relationships you can have with another person that you have fought with. That type of brotherhood is something that, man, it is a blessing to experience. It is an amazing thing to have friends like that. But it's also, thank God you do have those guys, because those are the ones that save you whenever you start feeling the consequences of those physical and moral injuries. It's those guys who love you that much that are there for you whenever you start feeling that fallout.
All right. This has been an amazing conversation. Let's talk about what you're doing now and how you're kind of trying to turn that page, that next chapter in your life, and what you're doing to take all of this knowledge that you've learned about yourself, about the world around you, and how you're putting it into that next generation.
I have started a company, Valor Point Human Systems, and it is taking a lot of the things that we have discussed with understanding the way that we are designed, and that you need to be a complete person by addressing your physical health, your lifestyle, the way that you eat, the way you construct your day, the mindset that you have, and how that feeds into your performance of whatever you pursue, whether that's in your vocation, your family life, your parenthood, whatever it may be. I'm looking at a holistic way of helping people develop. The concept is really off of something that we have in the special operations community. At the SOCOM level, it's called the POTIF. Within SF, it's called the Thor 3 program, but it's the holistic human performance and health program. But it acknowledges all the different domains of who you are, and it addresses how that optimizes your life and your performance and what you do. And that's what I am trying to do with the function of this business, is provide that to those that are outside of the community, whether it be executives, veterans, once they leave the military, law enforcement, first responders of all types, but folks that they have something that they want to optimize, and they want to figure it out. Like, I think we figured out, and it's folks like, again, I got the huge benefit of knowing guys like Jeff Dardia and Chris Free, and the folks that have made those monumental developments and understanding of how to make your life as best it can be and your performance as optimal as possible.
Jeff and Chris are both amazing human beings. I want to know if you look at this new thing that you're doing now as just an extension of life saving, which was the very first definition that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation.
Absolutely. How many people get wrapped up in the stress of their life and forget what they even started for? I think, and that's due to a litany of difficult factors to identify, and even more difficult to acknowledge and treat and figure out. So with that framework, looking, like I said, at the foundation and the contributing factors to what it is, like, it is in line with what I've been doing for my entire adult life. And it is where it used to be, I was doing my best to save, I was working alongside and trying to save the guy next to me. I'm now trying to do that for people that don't have that community or don't have that luxury provided to them.
Well, where can people find out more about this? Where can they find you on social media, on the internet? Where can they find out about this program and how they can become a part of it?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn by my name, Chad White. You can look at Valor Point Human Systems on Instagram. And All of my information is there. I think we might, if there's notes on this, we could probably tag some of that in the bottom of it with my email and phone number. But that's it, is you reach out and contact me, and it all starts with a conversation where we start off with a good conversation to see where you're at, what you need, if this is a good fit between you and I, and if I'm the right one that can help you. If not, I can help you figure out who that is. Or if it is, then we figure out where we're going to start and how we're going to go about it.
What would you say to people that are nervous about taking that first step?
I think that you need to make a definitive choice to get out of your way. And another lesson that I learned is don't convince yourself that you aren't worth fixing whatever you can by removing your bias, by removing your limiting factors. Figure out where you can optimize your health, your marriage, your relationships with your family, with your job, like how you become the best leader. How do you learn how to serve the people that are on your team that work for you? The amazing thing that it is to truly serve as a leader is such a rewarding thing whenever you do that in service to someone. And I think there's absolutely no reason not to pursue that and optimize what you're doing.
All right. One more time, let's go quickly over where they can find you for your actual names on the different social medias.
Right. On LinkedIn, I'm on Chad White on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it is on Valor Point Human Systems. On LinkedIn or on my Instagram page, you can see the sheet that outlines what we do and how we function. But as it is for where we are right now, it is very much like I've got to have a conversation with you starting off to see if this is the right fit for what we're doing, like if I'm the right guy for you. So that's where it starts. You can call me on my phone. You can email me, c_white@valorpoinths.com, or any of those social medias.
All right, man. I'm so happy we did this. I told you we'd go a little longer than an hour, so we've had quite a conversation. Guys, you know where you can find Chad. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast. And you can find me on YouTube where all these conversations, they're in video form at Dynamic Tales Delivered, the DTD podcast. But your one-stop shop, it's got audio, video. It goes way deeper into these conversations. There's blogs on there that talk about specific things that we've talked about in these conversations. Jump on the mailing list because we're starting to send out a newsletter. Everything that you need to know about this show, what happened in the past and what's going to happen in the future is all there, dtdpodcast.net. One more thing. Let's talk about my buddy Hoot over at Nomadic Research. I'm getting ready to head out and meet up with those guys. And I got to tell you, man, if you just want to look cool, I wear the shirts every week. I wear the hats every week. I use the bags when I travel, all of that kind of stuff. If you just want to look cool in the combat zone, in the urban zone, or at the mall, or just dropping your kids off at school, nomadicresearch.com. They have everything that you would want there. Hats, shirts, hoodies, bags, anything that you can think of, they're there. nomadicresearch.com. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. That's Chad. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.